Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the U's Valiant, his eyes fixed on the massive view screen showing the swirling colors of the Kepler Nebula. The purple and gold clouds of gas stretched across space like a painted canvas. This was the meeting place where humanity would finally join the galaxy's greatest alliance. After 50 years of waiting and preparing, Earth had received the invitation they had dreamed of. Admiral Lisa Carter walked across the bridge of the flagship UES Liberty, her uniform perfectly pressed and her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had served in Earth's Navy for 30 years, fighting pirates in the outer colonies and protecting trade routes from raiders. Now she faced the biggest challenge of her career. The Galactic Council had chosen her to represent all of humanity in their first official meeting. The human fleet moved through space in perfect formation. 12 ships, each one representing Earth's finest technology and crew. The vessels were sleek and angular, built for both exploration and defense. Their hulls gleamed silver in the light of distant stars. Inside each ship, thousands of men and women worked at their stations, monitoring systems and preparing for the historic moment ahead. Captain Ryan Brooks commanded the escort vessel UES Defender, keeping his ship at the proper distance as the diplomatic protocols required. His crew was nervous but excited. They had trained for this moment their entire careers. The chance to meet alien civilizations and learn from species that had traveled the stars for thousands of years was beyond anything they had imagined. The Council station appeared on their screens like a small moon made of crystal and metal. It orbited a binary star system, two suns that danced around each other in eternal harmony. The station was enormous, easily the size of Earth's largest cities. Lights twinkled across its surface like stars, and massive docking bays could accommodate ships of any size or design. As the human fleet approached, Admiral Carter received a transmission from the station. The voice was melodious and strange, clearly not human but somehow beautiful. "Welcome, children of Earth," the voice said. "We are honored by your presence. Please follow the guidance signals to your assigned docking bay." The speaker was Crystalline Song of Morning Light, the Zephyrian ambassador who had served as Earth's contact with the Council. Her people were tall and graceful, with skin that looked like living crystal. They could change colors based on their emotions, and their voices carried musical tones that no human throat could produce. She had visited Earth several times over the past decade, learning about human culture and helping to arrange this historic meeting. Commander Morrison felt a mix of excitement and worry as he watched the docking procedures. Everything seemed to be going perfectly, but his military training made him cautious. He had studied every report about alien contact, every intelligence briefing about the Council's member species. Something felt different about this meeting. Though he could not put his finger on what it was, the Council chambers were beyond magnificent. The great hall was shaped like a sphere with no clear floor or ceiling. Artificial gravity allowed delegates to sit on any surface, creating a three-dimensional seating arrangement that accommodated dozens of different species. The walls were transparent, showing the swirling colors of the binary star system outside. Representatives from across the galaxy filled the chamber. The Taraxians were massive beings with thick, armored skin that looked like natural battle armor. They moved slowly but with great dignity, their deep voices rumbling when they spoke. The Valdry seemed to be made of living light, their translucent forms shifting and changing as they moved. They communicated through patterns of color and brightness that danced across their bodies. There were dozens of other species, each one unique and fascinating. Some breathed different gases and wore environment suits. Others lived in tanks of liquid that allowed them to survive in the station's atmosphere. A few existed as pure energy, their consciousness housed in mechanical bodies that allowed them to interact with physical beings. Admiral Carter stood at the center of the chamber, her small human form dwarfed by the alien delegates around her. She held a datapad containing humanity's presentation, months of work by Earth's best scientists, historians, and diplomats. The document outlined human history, their achievements, their hopes for the future, and their desire to contribute to galactic civilization. Honored delegates, Admiral Carter began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. I stand before you today not just as a representative of Earth, but as a voice for all humanity. We come to you in peace, seeking friendship and the chance to learn from your wisdom and experience. She spoke about Earth's journey from a primitive world to a spacefaring civilization. She described human art, music, and literature sharing examples of the creativity and passion that defined her species. She talked about scientific discoveries, medical advances, and the technologies that had allowed humanity to reach for the stars. The alien delegates listened with apparent interest. Some asked questions about human society, their government systems, and their military capabilities. The Taraxian representative wanted to know about human conflict resolution, while the Valdry were fascinated by human emotions and their expression through art. Throughout the presentation, Crystalline Song of Morning Light provided commentary and context, helping to translate not just words but concepts between species. She seemed genuinely supportive of humanity's application for membership, speaking eloquently about the potential contributions Earth could make to galactic civilization. But beneath the polite questions and diplomatic smiles, darker currents were flowing. In private chambers and secured communication channels, the Council's true leaders were discussing a very different plan. They had not invited humanity to join them as equals. Instead, they had lured Earth's fleet and leadership into a trap that would eliminate what they saw as a dangerous threat to their carefully maintained order. The Council had existed for millennia, bringing stability to their section of the galaxy through strict rules and harsh punishments for those who challenged their authority. They had watched humanity's rapid advancement with growing alarm. In less than 2 centuries, humans had gone from primitive agricultural societies to interstellar travelers. Their technology advanced at a pace that frightened the older species, who had needed thousands of years to achieve similar progress. Even more concerning was human unpredictability. Other species followed predictable patterns of behavior, making them easy to control and manipulate. Humans were different. They were creative, adaptable, and willing to take risks that other species would never consider. The Council's leaders saw this as a fundamental threat to galactic stability. As Admiral Carter concluded her presentation, the chamber filled with what seemed like approving sounds from the various species. The arbiter, the ancient being who served as the Council's speaker, rose from its position at the chamber's center. Its form was difficult to describe, seeming to shift between different states of matter. Representatives of Earth, the arbiter announced, its voice carrying the weight of eons. The Council will now deliberate on your application for membership. Please remain in the chamber while we consider your request. Admiral Carter nodded respectfully and took her seat alongside her diplomatic team. They had no way of knowing that this would be the last free choice they would make for many months. The trap was about to spring, and humanity was about to learn that the galaxy was far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The betrayal came without warning. Admiral Carter was still smiling from what seemed like a successful presentation when the chamber's walls began to glow with an eerie blue light. Energy barriers materialized around the human delegation, trapping them in a small section of the Great Hall. The barriers hummed with power, creating a prison that no human technology could break. Crystalline Song of Morning Light stepped forward, her crystal skin shifting from the warm golden color it had shown during the presentation to a cold, harsh blue. Her musical voice now carried notes of satisfaction and cruelty. "Foolish humans," she said, her words cutting through the chamber like ice. "Did you really think we would welcome you as equals?" The arbiter rose from its central position, its shifting form now appearing more solid and threatening. Its voice boomed through the chamber with the weight of ancient authority. "Humanity has been judged," it announced to the gathered delegates. "Your species grows too quickly, learns too fast, and changes too much. You are a danger to the peace we have maintained for thousands of years." Admiral Carter pressed against the energy barrier, her hands meeting invisible resistance that sparked with electrical discharge. "This is a violation of every diplomatic protocol," she shouted. "We came here in good faith, seeking friendship and alliance." "Your good faith means nothing," the Arbiter replied. "We have studied your species for decades. Your wars, your expansion, your refusal to accept limits. You would destabilize everything we have built, therefore you must be eliminated." Outside the station, the human fleet was discovering the true scope of the trap. Captain Brooks stood on the bridge of the UES Defender, watching his tactical display fill with red warning symbols. Ships were appearing all around them, emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation. The Council had assembled the largest fleet in galactic history for this moment. Lieutenant Kelly Martinez, the Defender's tactical officer, reported the incoming threats with professional calm despite the fear in her voice. "Sir, I count over 600 vessels. Taraxian dreadnoughts, Valdry fighter swarms, and ship classes I don't recognize. We're completely surrounded." The enemy ships were massive and ancient, some clearly dating back thousands of years. The Taraxian dreadnoughts were the size of small cities, their armored hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets. The Valdry fighters moved like schools of fish, their energy forms allowing them to change direction instantly without regard for physics. Commander Morrison aboard the UES Valiant felt his stomach drop as he realized the full extent of their situation. The Council had been planning this for years, maybe decades. Every piece of information they had shared with humanity had been carefully chosen to bring them to this moment. The diplomatic invitation, the friendship, the promises of alliance. All of it had been lies. "All human ships, this is Admiral Carter," came a transmission from the station. But something was wrong with her voice. It sounded strained, desperate. "We have been betrayed. The Council intends to destroy us all. You must escape and warn Earth." The Council fleet opened fire immediately. There were no demands for surrender, no ultimatums, no final warnings. This was not intended to be a capture operation. They meant to wipe humanity from the stars completely. The first barrage focused on the UES Liberty, Admiral Carter's flagship. The Liberty's shields flared to life, their blue glow visible even from the other human ships. But the concentrated fire from 3 Taraxian dreadnoughts was too much. The shields collapsed in seconds, and energy beams began tearing through the ship's hull. Atmosphere vented into space in bright streams as the Liberty began to break apart. Captain Brooks made the hardest decision of his career. "All ships, execute." "Protocol 7, he ordered over the fleet communications. Protocol 7 was humanity's most classified military directive, developed in secret over decades of preparation for exactly this scenario. The human ships began to move in ways that surprised their attackers. Instead of the predictable formations that most species used, the human vessels started weaving through space in complex patterns. They accelerated and decelerated unpredictably, making it difficult for the enemy to target them effectively. The UES Thunderbolt, under Captain Nick Sullivan's command, demonstrated why human weapons were different from anything the Council had faced. Instead of energy beams or plasma bursts, the Thunderbolt fired solid projectile at incredible speeds. The kinetic rounds punched through Taraxian armor like bullets through paper, causing massive internal damage the enemy had expected. Energy shields to protect them from human weapons. They were wrong. Human military doctrine had been developed assuming they would always be outgunned and outnumbered. Every weapon system had been designed to be effective against superior technology through clever engineering and unconventional tactics. The UES Phoenix, commanded by Captain LaVar Bennett, unleashed humanity's secret advantage. Her ship's artificial intelligence systems, something the Council species had never developed due to their fear of machine consciousness, began infiltrating enemy networks. Within minutes, Valdry fighters were turning on their own forces, their control systems compromised by human computer viruses. But even with these advantages, the humans were still vastly outnumbered. For every Council ship they destroyed, 5 more took its place. The UES Liberty finally succumbed to the overwhelming firepower, her hull cracking open like an egg. Emergency pods launched from the dying ship, but most were destroyed by enemy fire before they could reach safety. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Watson, commanding the Marine unit aboard the UES Defender, watched the destruction with growing anger. Her troops were ready to fight, but there was no enemy to board, no ground to take. All they could do was watch as their comrades died in the void of space. The Council forces pressed their attack with ruthless efficiency. They had planned this ambush for years, studying human tactics and capabilities. They knew exactly how to counter every human advantage except one: the nature of human. Faster than light travel. Commander Morrison realized that their only hope was to escape and warn Earth. The surviving human ships began charging their quantum tunnel drives, a technology that the Council had never seen before. Unlike the hyperspace systems used by other species, human FTL drives could open a passage to any point in space instantly. "All ships, prepare for emergency jump," Morrison ordered. "We're going home." The Council forces moved to intercept the escaping humans, but they were too late. The remaining 8 human ships vanished in brilliant flashes of exotic energy, leaving the enemy fleet staring at empty space. The Council had won the battle, but they had revealed their true nature too early. On the Council station, Admiral Carter and her surviving team members were dragged away to high-security prison cells. But even in defeat, Carter was already planning. The Council had made a mistake by keeping them alive, and she intended to make them pay for their betrayal. The trap had been sprung, but humanity was far from defeated. The real war was just beginning, and the galaxy would soon learn that humans were most dangerous when they had nothing left to lose. The quantum tunnel drive created a passage through space that defied all known physics. Commander Morrison felt the familiar sensation of reality bending around him as the UES Valiant slipped through dimensions. The 8 surviving human ships traveled through the tunnel together, their crews silent and shaken by what they had witnessed. Captain Brooks sat in his command chair aboard the UES Defender, staring at the damage reports scrolling across his screen. Half his crew was injured, his ship's hull was cracked in 12 places, and 3 of his weapon systems were offline. But they were alive, and that was more than he had expected an hour ago. The tunnel collapsed behind them as the human fleet emerged in the Sol system. Earth appeared on their screens like a blue jewel against the darkness of space. Home had never looked so precious or so vulnerable. The crews knew that the Council would eventually come for Earth, and when they did, they would bring the full might of their ancient alliance. Lieutenant Martinez worked frantically at her station, compiling data on the enemy fleet's capabilities. Every piece of information could be vital for Earth's defense. The Toraxian dreadnoughts were slow but heavily armored. The Valdry fighters were fast but fragile. The Council had dozens of other ship types, each with different strengths and weaknesses. Emergency transmissions flooded the communication channels as Earth's defense networks detected the returning fleet. The ships were broadcasting priority alerts warning of imminent invasion. Within minutes, every military base on Earth, Luna, and Mars was on high alert. Commander Morrison's voice was hoarse as he transmitted his report to Earth Defense Command. "This is Commander Morrison reporting emergency contact. The Galactic Council has betrayed us. Admiral Carter and her diplomatic team are prisoners. The Council intends to destroy humanity completely. We need to prepare for war." The response from Earth was immediate and overwhelming. President Helen Rodriguez convened an emergency session of the Global Defense Council within hours. Military leaders from every nation gathered in the secure bunkers beneath Geneva, their faces grim as they listened to the survivors' reports. General Kevin Murphy, head of Earth's combined military forces, studied the tactical data with growing concern. 600 ships, he muttered, shaking his head. And that's just what they brought to the ambush. The Council probably has thousands more scattered across the galaxy. Dr. Patricia Hayes, the brilliant scientist who had developed humanity's quantum tunnel technology, was brought out of retirement to advise the Defense Council. Her silver hair was wild from years of working in isolation, but her mind was as sharp as ever. "We have advantages they don't know about," she said firmly. "Our FTL drives, our AI systems, our manufacturing capabilities. But we need time to prepare. The secret shipyards of Luna came alive with activity. For decades, Earth had been preparing for the possibility of hostile alien contact. Hidden facilities in asteroid fields and on the dark side of the moon had been building weapons and ships in secret. Now those preparations would be put to the test. Meanwhile, on the Council Station, Admiral Carter and her team were being held in high-security cells designed to contain the most dangerous criminals in galactic history. The walls were made of some kind of energy-resistant material, and the air was filled with dampening fields that blocked all electronic devices. Commander Danny Foster, the mission science officer, examined their prison with the methodical approach of a trained researcher. "The energy barriers operate on a rotating frequency," he whispered to Carter. "If we can find the pattern, we might be able to disrupt them." Lieutenant Emma Wright, the team's communications specialist, had managed to hide a small quantum transmitter in her boot before their capture. The device was barely larger than a coin, but it might be their only link to Earth. "I can try to send a message," she said, "but it will be weak and might not get through." Carter nodded grimly. "Do it. Earth needs to know what we've learned about the Council's structure and capabilities." The Council's prison guards were a mix of different species, each one chosen for their loyalty and ruthlessness. The Toraxians were living tanks, their armored skin proof against most weapons. The Valdry guards could phase through solid matter, making escape attempts nearly impossible. Other species provided specialized security functions that made the prison almost impregnable, but Admiral Carter had not survived 30 years in Earth's military by giving up easily. She began to observe the guards' routines, looking for patterns and weaknesses. Every species had limitations, and she was determined to find them. The prison held more than just the human diplomatic team. Carter discovered that the Council had been eliminating potential threats for centuries. Species that grew too quickly, developed too advanced technology, or showed too much independence were quietly destroyed. The few survivors were kept as examples of what happened to those who challenged the Council's authority. In one of the neighboring cells, Carter met Vex Prime Hunter, a member of the Kithara species. His people had been wiped out 50 years ago for developing biological weapons that the Council deemed too dangerous. He was the last of his kind, kept alive as a living reminder of his species' fate. "Your people are not the first to face the Council's wrath," Vex Prime Hunter told Carter through the prison's translation system. "But you might be the first to have a chance at revenge. Your technology is unlike anything we have seen." Carter listened to stories from other prisoners, learning about the Council's methods and weaknesses. The Alliance was not as united as it appeared. Many species had been forced to join through threats and economic pressure. Some secretly hoped for the Council's downfall, but were too afraid to act. Back on Earth, the mobilization was proceeding at an unprecedented pace. Factories that had been producing civilian goods were converted to military production overnight. Scientists worked around the clock to develop new weapons and defensive systems. The population was told that humanity faced an existential threat, and they responded with determination and unity. The UES Retribution was the first of the new warships to roll out of the Luna shipyards. Unlike the exploration vessels that had been destroyed at the Kepler system, this ship was built for one purpose: to fight and win against superior numbers. Her hull was angular and aggressive, bristling with weapons that could punch through any known armor. Captain Steve Collins, a veteran of the Mars colonial wars, was given command of the new flagship UES Indomitable. His first officer commander, Rachel Davis, had distinguished herself in dozens of battles against pirates and raiders. Together, they would lead humanity's counterattack against the Council. The new fleet incorporated everything humanity had learned from the disastrous First Contact. The ships were faster, more maneuverable, and packed with weapons designed specifically to counter Council technology. Most importantly, they were crewed by people who knew they were fighting for the survival of their species. As the weeks passed, intelligence reports began to filter in from deep space. The Council was mobilizing their own forces, calling in ships from across the galaxy. They had underestimated humanity once, but they would not make that mistake again. The next battle would determine whether humans would join the ranks of extinct species or carve out their own place among the stars. The pieces were moving into position for a conflict that would reshape the galaxy. Humanity had been betrayed, but they were far from defeated. The real war was about to begin. The return of Commander Morrison's battered fleet sent shock waves through every government on Earth. Within hours of receiving his report, President Helen Rodriguez had called together the most powerful leaders from around the world. The emergency meeting took place in the deep underground bunkers beneath the Swiss Alps, where Earth's most important decisions were made during times of crisis. General Kevin Murphy spread tactical displays across the conference table, showing the overwhelming size of the Council's forces. The holographic images painted a grim picture of humanity's chances. "We're facing an enemy that has been building their military for thousands of years," he said, his voice heavy with concern. "They have technology we can barely understand and resources from dozens of star systems." President Rodriguez studied the data with the calm focus that had made her one of Earth's most respected leaders. "What are our advantages, General?" "There must be something we can use against them." Dr. Patricia Hayes stepped forward from her position near the back of the room. At 75 years old, she was still the most brilliant scientist humanity had ever produced. Her quantum tunnel technology had given Earth the ability to travel faster than light, and now it might be their only hope for survival. "Our FTL drives are completely different from anything the Council uses," Dr. Hayes explained. "They require specific jump points and follow predictable paths. Our ships can appear anywhere instantly, without warning. That gives us a huge tactical advantage." The scientist activated a holographic display showing the differences between human and alien technology. "Their hyperspace drives are like following roads through space. Our quantum tunnels are like teleportation. We can hit them where they don't expect and disappear before they can respond." Director Frank Johnson, head of Earth's Intelligence Services, added his own analysis. "We've been monitoring Council communications since the attack. Their alliance isn't as strong as they want us to believe. Many species were forced to join through threats and pressure. Some might be willing to help us if they see a chance to break free." The secret facilities on Luna had been working non-stop since the fleet's return. The shipyards that had been hidden from alien observation for decades were now operating at full capacity. Captain Margaret Lee walked through the construction bays, watching as the new warships took shape. The UES Fury was nearly complete, her hull gleaming under the bright work lights. Unlike the exploration vessels that had been destroyed at Kepler, this ship was built for war. Her armor could absorb energy weapons, her shields could deflect kinetic rounds, and her weapons were designed to punch through any known defensive system. "How long until she's ready?" Captain Lee asked the chief engineer. 2 more days for the weapon systems, another day for final testing," came the reply. "She be the most powerful ship humanity has ever built." Similar scenes were playing out across the solar system. The asteroid belt mining stations had been converted to weapons factories. Mars's industrial complexes were churning out ammunition and spare parts. Even Earth's moon was hollow in places, filled with secret military installations that had been prepared for exactly this kind of emergency. On the Council station, Admiral Carter was working on her own plans. The quantum transmitter that Lieutenant Wright had hidden was small but powerful enough to send brief messages to Earth. The signals were weak and had to be carefully timed to avoid detection by the President's security systems. "Message received and understood," came the reply from Earth Defense Command. "Continue gathering intelligence." "Help is coming," Carter smiled grimly as she decoded the message. Earth was preparing for war, but they needed information about the Council's weaknesses and capabilities. That was something she and her team could provide, even from their prison cells. Commander Foster had been studying the prison's structure for weeks, mapping out the guard rotations and security systems. The Taraxian guards changed shifts every 8 hours, he whispered during one of their brief conversations. "The Valdry Watchers phase through the walls every 30 minutes to check on us. But there's a gap in their coverage during the shift changes. Lieutenant Wright had been using her technical skills to learn about the prison's computer systems. "I've identified the main data network," she reported quietly. "If we can access it for just a few minutes, I might be able to download information about Council military positions and fleet movements." The other prisoners had become valuable sources of information. Vex Prime Hunter, the last survivor of the Cathara species, shared details about Council military doctrine and tactics. Other alien prisoners told stories of their own people's destruction, revealing patterns in how the Council eliminated threats. "They always strike without warning," explained Zeta 7 Ascending, a former leader of the peaceful Hymori civilization. "They use overwhelming force to prevent any organized resistance. But they've never faced an enemy with your kind of technology." Meanwhile, the new human fleet was taking shape. Captain Collins stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, watching his crew run final systems checks. The ship was twice the size of the old exploration vessels, with armor that could withstand direct hits from Thoraxian, plasma cannons and weapons that could crack the hull of a dreadnought. Commander Davis, his first officer, reported on the fleets. "Readiness, all ships are operational and fully crewed. We have 300 vessels ready for combat, with more coming online every day." The crews have been training in combat simulations based on the tactical data from Kepler. The training was intensive and realistic. Virtual reality systems allowed human crews to practice fighting against Council ship types, learning how to exploit their weaknesses and counter their advantages. The AI systems that controlled human ships were constantly updating their tactics. Based on new intelligence, Dr. Hayes had been working on upgrades to the quantum tunnel drives that would make them even more effective in combat. "I've developed a new application," she told the assembled fleet commanders. "We can use the quantum fields to disrupt enemy electronics and weapons systems. It's like an electromagnetic pulse, but much more powerful." Earth's industrial capacity was being pushed to its absolute limits. Factories that had been producing consumer goods were converted to military production overnight. Civilian spacecraft were refitted with weapons and armor. Even the luxury liners that carried tourists to Mars were being turned into troop transports and supply ships. The population responded to the crisis with remarkable unity. When the government announced that humanity faced extinction, people from every nation volunteered to help. Scientists worked around the clock developing new technologies. Engineers designed better weapons and defenses. Even children collected scrap metal that could be recycled into ship hulls. Intelligence reports from deep space painted a frightening picture of Council preparations. Their forces were gathering in staging areas throughout the galaxy, calling in ships from dozens of star systems. The Ancient Alliance was mobilizing for what they intended to be the final destruction of humanity, but the Council was making the same mistake they had made at Kepler. They were preparing to fight the humans. They thought they knew not the species that humanity had become. Earth's secret preparations, hidden for decades, were about to be revealed in a way that would shock the galaxy. The stage was set for a conflict that would determine whether humans would join the long list of species destroyed by the Council, or whether they would shatter the Ancient Alliance and create a new order among the stars. The real war was about to begin, and neither side fully understood what they were about to face. 6 months after the betrayal at Kepler, the human fleet was ready for war. Captain Collins stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, watching the final preparations for humanity's counterattack. 300 ships filled the space around Earth, each one bristling with weapons designed to fight an enemy that outnumbered them 20-1. The plan was bold and dangerous. Instead of massing their forces for a single massive battle, the humans would strike at 12 different Council systems simultaneously. The quantum tunnel drives would allow them to appear without warning, hit their targets hard, and disappear before the enemy could respond effectively. "All fleet commanders, this is Admiral Collins," he announced over the communication system. "Remember, we're not just fighting for revenge. We're fighting for the right of every species in the galaxy to exist without fear. Today, we end the Council's reign of terror. The UES Retribution, under Captain Lee's command, led the assault on the Council's primary shipyard at Proxima Centauri. Her ship emerged from quantum space directly above the massive construction facility, catching the defenders completely off guard. The shipyard was protected by energy shields and defensive platforms, but nothing could stop the focused firepower of 50 human warships. Captain Lee watched as her weapons tore through the ancient defenses like paper. The adaptive armor on her ship shifted and changed, absorbing the energy blasts from Taraxian defensive cannons. "Target the main power generators," she ordered. "Bring down those shields." The human ships moved with precision that amazed their enemies. AI systems coordinated their attacks with inhuman accuracy, while quantum computers calculated firing solutions faster than any biological mind could process. The Council forces, used to centuries of predictable warfare, found themselves unable to counter human tactics. Meanwhile, Commander Morrison led a smaller force in a desperate mission to rescue Admiral Carter and her team. The UES Shadow, a stealth ship designed specifically for infiltration, slipped through the Council station's defenses like a ghost. Morrison knew that the rescue mission was almost impossible, but he also knew that Admiral Carter had been gathering intelligence that could win the war. The Shadow docked with the station through an abandoned maintenance port that the prisoners had identified during their months of careful observation. Morrison and his team moved through the station's corridors, using maps that Lieutenant Wright had transmitted during her brief communications with Earth. The prison level was heavily guarded, but the human infiltration team had advantages the Council guards had never faced. Their armor could change color to match their surroundings, making them nearly invisible. Their weapons fired projectiles that could punch through any known armor, and their movements were coordinated by AI systems that predicted enemy positions. Before they could react, Admiral Carter heard the sound of fighting in the corridor outside her cell. The energy barriers that had held her prisoner for months suddenly flickered and died as the station's power systems were disrupted by human computer viruses. She stepped out of her cell to find Commander Morrison waiting for her with a grin on his face. "About time you showed up," Carter said with a smile. "I was starting to think you'd forgotten about us." But the rescue mission revealed something even more important than freeing the prisoners. Carter and her team had discovered that the Council's unity was completely fake. Many of the alien species were secretly working against their oppressors, waiting for someone strong enough to lead a rebellion. "Half the Council's member species want to break free," Carter explained as they fought their way back to the Shadow. "They've been sending us messages through the prison's maintenance systems. If we can show them that the Council can be defeated, they'll join us." The battles raging across the galaxy were proving exactly that point. Human forces struck at the Council's economic centers, military bases, and communication networks with devastating effectiveness. The UES Fury, commanded by Captain Davis, destroyed an entire Valdry battle fleet in the Vega system, using quantum field disruptors to shut down their energy-based life forms, the Council's ancient dreadnoughts, which had terrorized the galaxy for millennia, found themselves helpless against human technology. Their massive size, which had always been an advantage, now made them easy targets for human kinetic weapons. Ships that had survived thousands of battles were torn apart by projectiles moving at incredible speeds, but the final battle took place in the Council's home system, where the Arbiter made its last stand. The ancient being had gathered the remaining loyal forces around its personal flagship, a vessel the size of a small moon that had been the symbol of Council power for eons. "Captain," Collins brought the Indomitable directly into battle with the Arbiter ship. The enemy vessel unleashed weapons that bent space and time, creating gravitational fields that crushed normal matter and energy beams that could cut through planets. But human ships were not normal, and their crews refused to be intimidated by weapons they didn't understand. "All ships, focus fire on the main weapon arrays," Collins ordered. "Remember, this thing has been bullying the galaxy for thousands of years. Time to show it what humans think of bullies." The battle was fierce and costly. Human ships fell too. The Arbiter's exotic weapons, their crews dying in flashes of twisted spacetime. But for every human vessel destroyed, the enemy lost 10. The Council forces, demoralized by months of defeats, began to surrender or flee rather than face certain destruction. Lieutenant Martinez, now serving as the Indomitable's tactical officer, made the discovery that ended the war. Sir, the Arbiter's weapons are vulnerable to quantum interference. If we overload our FTL drives, we can create a cascade effect that will shut down its entire system. Collins didn't hesitate. Do it. All ships, prepare to overload your quantum drives on my signal. The human fleet sacrificed their own FTL systems to create a massive quantum disruption field. The Arbiter's ancient weapons flickered and died, as the interference severed its connection to the exotic energy sources that powered them. Without its weapons, the massive ship was just a target. The defeat of the Arbiter marked the end of the old galactic order. Across the galaxy, oppressed species rose up against their council overlords. The ancient alliance that had maintained control through fear and intimidation crumbled in a matter of days. Admiral Carter, now free and back in command, began the long process of building a new galactic government. Instead of the rigid hierarchy that the Council had enforced, the new alliance would be based on cooperation and mutual respect. Species would be free to develop their own technologies and cultures without fear of destruction. Commander Morrison, promoted to admiral for his role in the rescue mission, stood on the bridge of the new flagship UES Liberty II. Through the viewports, he could see human and alien ships working together to build the first, truly democratic government the galaxy had ever known. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed humanity had instead forged them into the galaxy's greatest force for freedom. The age of council tyranny was over, and a new era of hope and cooperation had begun. Humanity had not just survived their trial by fire. They had emerged as the champions of every species that had ever dreamed of freedom.